Hello, everyone. Oh,
Hello.
there he is. Hi, Sai.
Hello. Let me choose my filter for the week. Well, filter.
How's
Hey,
everyone doing?
everyone. I'm good. Feeling
Yeah,
very raw today.
I love it. You're so fierce. Rrr,
Cougary. Cougary.
cougary. I love it. So
Hello,
good.
Angie. Wait, Jen Estrada is here. Hi, Jen. ¿Qué
Rawr,
tal?
yes. All right, you guys, welcome back to Planted with Kay and Sai. I am Kay of Enrooted Love.
And I'm Cyril of Cyril Cybernated. Welcome.
Welcome, everyone. And today we are going to share our growing experience with Anthuriums.
Anthuriums.
Yes. I have to say, I'm going to be completely upfront with you guys about this. There was a point in the last, how long have I been collecting? About 3 years now? In the last 3 years where I said, I won't own Anthuriums. I was like,
Really?
they're divas. I don't want them. I can't deal with it, blah, blah, blah. And then it turned to, okay, well, I'll only have the Clarinervium because I love Clarinervium and how it looks. Because, it's a heart-shaped leaf and blah, blah, blah. No, that's not true. It has grown and it's just kind of snowballed.
Well, yeah, I agree. I think my Clary was also my first real Anthurium because I didn't really buy I didn't find any local Anthuriums in my area. So I had to get a Clary from another continent. And yes, I agree. I was like, okay, let's just do the Clary. And at that time, I also wanted to do the Vichy.
Oh,
I'm like, yeah,
abs
I'm
for
like, I love,
days.
yeah, I'm like the king of Anthurium. And then I didn't realize that they were slowly creeping into my collection.
I know. Somehow, you know what it was that made me grow my collection was when I won one of your giveaways for the Doriaki. I was like, after I saw it in person, I was like, this is beautiful, and I get it now. I know why people love them. So it's just, I don't know, it's kind of grown on me. And I'm excited to share a couple of my favorites that I have here, as well as a couple new acquisitions I got. So, well, let me kick things off by asking you, Sai, because I know you've had experience with growing in different growing media. Can you kind of share your experience with organic media versus what you're doing now?
Yes. So when I got my Clary, it wasn't imported. It didn't come with anything. So of course, as a beginner, you would look up things like, oh, coarse chunky mix. And I had, of course, them in soil. I also got the Vichy, like when it was like a really small seedling, and that also went to soil. I guess because my taste in Anthuriums wasn't that exquisite then, and I find that they were kind of like manageable because they were more of like, well, except for the Clary, but the Vichy, if they're more green and less velvety, I find that they're easier for me to keep alive indoors because they're like the Vichy is like closer to the ones that are sold at the grocery stores, the Andrianums, the pinks and the red. So personally, and it wasn't that tricky until I actually like probably experienced my second winter, because that's when my Clary started declining. I got my Clary around like fall, winter, going winter. So it was kind of, I didn't feel the struggle just then. But now, of course, I think all my Anthuriums are in self-watering and in pond now. So it definitely made a lot of difference because, as you go through your plant journey, you just learn about yourself even more. So growing in soil wasn't that hard, but it did have its challenges, especially for me and for the viewers out there that, who also wants to or who keeps on overwatering rather.
Yeah.
You know, it's that consistency of like, do I water now and then the soil gets too soggy, or if your mix is too fast draining, everything's just gonna dry up sooner than, you know, you wanted to. So it's the consistency.
Yeah. So when I got my first Clarinervium, it was from a grower here in the States, and it came in its chunky aeroid mix. And I was so stressed out about this because at that time I had already established my collection as passive hydro, and I was like, I don't know how to manage water, and I don't feel comfortable sticking a water meter or a moisture meter in there because I know that Anthuriums have these really juicy roots. So in my head, I'm thinking like, oh, what if I hit one of the roots and then, oh my gosh, now I'm dealing root rot, yada, yada, yada. So I went onto Instagram and I looked up Clarinervium, like the hashtag, and I just flipped through trying to see how other people were growing it. And I actually found a handful of folks who were growing it in LECA. So I reached out to them and was like, hey, you know, I saw that you grow your clary in LECA. How's it going? Like, how do you find care to be? And this is pretty typical of my research routine, right? As I canvass other plant growers and just kind of, you know, talk to them about it. And what I learned from them was that most of them said it took to it great, but then it either after a few months declined or then it would just stop growing and it kind of was just there. So I was like, oh, well, shoot, like, do I really want to like risk this? Because at the time, like it was my dream plant. So then I reached out to my friend Kevin, who's out in Germany, Kevin's Green Pets, and I asked him because out in Germany, Clarinerviums are so easily accessible. Like, I mean, like you go to a garden center and there are tables full of them, and they're also at a relatively affordable price. So I knew that, you know, going to him and asking would be a smart choice, and it really was. So he actually walked me through propagating it, because what ended up happening was I cleaned the roots out and it was just a massive root ball that it would not fit into the pot that I had. And so, you know, he talked me through propagating it. It went directly in pond. I propagated in pond in a self-watering pot. And I ended up with 2 Clarinerviums right then and there. So it was, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this worked. I was so stressed about it though, because this was back when I thought that paying $75 for a plant was way too expensive. And that's when I got it. And I was like, if I kill this $75 plant, like I'm going to be so upset. So hi Denise, I see you. So, you know, ever since that experience, I was like, okay, well, I'm all about pond. But then fast forward like a year later and I got my first Superbum. I put it in LECA for some reason. I don't know why, but I just did. And it did great. And all of a sudden, one cold night, all the roots just rotted and it died within a week. Like there was no saving that Superbum because it was just done. Hi, Eunice. So.
Now that you brought up the Superbum, the same thing happened to me. I don't know if it's just a curse, because Isa, my friend, Shiny Happy Leaf, we got it at the same time. Hers is like putting leaves left and right, and mine was in soil. So I kind of erased that in my memory. So I did have that bad experience with a Superbum in soil. And you're right, it just died. That was also winter time. Even a winter in California, it didn't like it.
So with that experience, I came to the conclusion, and I base this solely on my experience, right? And I haven't really talked to others about it, but I came to the conclusion that Anthuriums, although they can be epiphytic, terrestrial, and lithophytic, they may become sensitive to roots getting too cold. And I base that off of my Superbum, solely on my Superbum, because I got another one, planted it in pond, and it has just continued to grow and just be healthy. And it's now pushing pond out of the pot. So I know like it's time for a repot. So I think that there may be some kind of sensitivity to it. And so what I actually do, so part of my care regimen for my anthuriums for the winter time is that they all sit on seedling mats because they sit next to one of these windows back here. And although our windows are really great with insulation, there is a nighttime temp drop that I just don't want to risk. So what I do from November to March is I plug in those seedling mats and they sit there and they keep them nice and toasty. And just based on my experience, it's worked really well. So if you're ever like, you know, struggling with like desiccated roots and just kind of like root rot, I want to say it has something to do with their roots being very temperamental to big temperature drops.
Yes. Do you have a Superbum there, Kay?
It's downstairs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Daddy Longleaf.
What's that? Uh-oh. The signal. Can you guys hear me? Oh, okay, I see. Well, it's still, I don't know. If you guys can hear me, can somebody just comment real quick so that I know whether or not I need to reboot? Okay, so Sai left. I'm still here. I see you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's see if we can get Sai back on here.
Okay.
Thank you guys for your patience. There you go. Good. IG is not kicking us off today.
No.
Not like
so yeah, you weren't gone actually. I think it was just me that got cut off for.
Well, actually, Sai, if you want to chat for a little bit, I'll run downstairs and grab my Superbum just so that I can show everyone what it is. And so I'll be right back.
And I do have some examples. Sorry, I was saying daddy longleaves. I do have some other anthuriums. I'm glad that you brought that up because while I was looking up about anthuriums, of course, the common ones and the ones that I also grew up with are the ones with a pink and red inflorescence. But other than those type of anthuriums, based on my research, there's over 1,000 species and there's several on the plant Instagram game. Like probably the common ones are the Anthurium morox, which used to be like very sought after. I also have an Anthurium crystallinum over here. So this is also an Anthurium, especially with their signature. Yeah. And the Vichy, I'm never gonna say that right, is this one. This is what I got for $17 before.
Wow.
And yeah, these are all anthuriums, the last three ones that I shown you. So those are examples of anthuriums.
Which ones did you show?
Oh, I showed them a Warrock, Queen Anthurium, which is putting out a new leaf under pun. And which reminds me of questions later on that we will talk about. I also showed them my Clary, which I've posted recently. And yeah, the Vichy with the ever
so for those wondering, this is what Superbum looks like. And it's missing this front half because I have two little boys who just love to play really rough. And one day they were chasing each other and baby boy slipped and fell on half of it. So half kind of just fell out. But it's okay. I mean, it's part of having plants and kids. But so what I wanted to show you guys with this is that the roots are just growing crazy. Do you guys see that? They are actually very reminiscent of Phalaenopsis roots. And these are those really great epiphytic roots that just cling on. But this is in dire need of a repot because there's no longer pond up at the top anymore. And also you guys can see that I've got two yellowing leaves here. And normally one yellowing leaf doesn't really bother me. It's, you know, but this has been growing And I noticed that this last leaf came out a lot smaller than the rest of them. So this is its newest leaf. And then, like I said, I have the 2 yellowing leaves back here. So I know that it's time for a repot, and I'm kind of dreading it because I don't want to damage the roots. But this is Superbum. Yes. And no, I don't do faux pon. I know that sounds really snobby, but I only use Lechuza pon for my mixes. So yeah, there's Superbum right there.
Oh. Yes, and just to clarify, because everybody seems to be like blown away by the $17 Vichy. When I got it, it was in a 4-inch pot, and there were 2 seedlings that were probably like, the biggest leaf was probably 3/4 of this. So that was December of 2018, or was it like January of 2019, something like that. So what a few years could do. So this is what the plant is now. If you notice, I have like sticks and wires along the leaves because I'm trying to train it to face forward, because for a while it's been growing freely, and the leaves could be, you know, growing on all sorts of different directions. And the way that I, you know, do my Instagram, as much as possible, I want them to all face the same direction. And now that it's on top of like a cabinet, there's just one direction where the light source is. So hopefully in a few more months they will look more Instagrammable instead of just like growing and facing everywhere. So I'm just taming a teenager now.
I think it already looks Instagrammable, but when do I know?
Thank you.
All right.
Actually, so when I just pulled the plant, I just realized like, oh my God, there are 2 new leaves. Oh. And what's that? What's it to in the pot? See these on Insta, usually square pots. Oh, those are actually water.
They're water level indicators. So the way that these pots work, this is a self-watering pot. There is a platform that sits right around here. And the entire section down below is the water reservoir. And on that platform are these feet that have slits, or they're slotted feet that sit in the reservoir that allow for that capillary action for the pon or leca to pull water up via the media and the roots to support the plant. So this here is just a nice, easy little indicator for me. As you can see right now, it's down at empty, and that's on purpose because I do plan on repotting this week. I don't want to repot when it's full, when the reservoir is full, otherwise I'll just get water everywhere. But when I refill, I just do it up to the max line. And it's just a nice little indicator that tells me, you know.
Yes. So that you don't have to keep on watering, but you have to be careful because it can get stuck though, you know?
Yes.
What I do is like I flick the meters.
Yep. I go around and I flick all the meters every day. So I think
you do that every day. Wow.
No, just like I sit around, like I walk around with my coffee and I'm like flick, flick, flick. That's right. Pitik, pitik here. So we got a ton of questions this week, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Hit me with one.
So yes, the first one was from Izumi. Thank you for sending this in. They said like any Anthurium variety recommendations for beginners. So maybe give us like 2 recommendations for easy Anthuriums.
So the grocery store, hardware store ones that have the bright red flowers or pink, sometimes they come in purple. I think that's a really great Anthurium hybrid to get your, to like dip your toes in. Because capillary action. Yes.
Yes.
Such a good name. But yeah, because it's a hybrid, these things were genetically engineered to just be easy. And typically with hybrids, they are a little bit easier than species. And that's plants across the board. Like you'll hear a lot of like orchid growers or collectors talk about how, species are a lot more specific in their care, whereas hybrids can be a little more forgiving. Same goes with Anthuriums. So if your very first Anthurium, I would say just grab one of those. Like they're always around. I see them all the time. And they're, you know, they're used as like gifts and stuff like that. So that's a really great one to dip your toes in. And then if you want to kind of start getting into the velvet leafed ones, then I would say Clarinervium would be the most forgiving one that there is. It Mine has just gone through so much stress, and it still continues to grow and push inflorescences for me. And it's gorgeous. Like Clarinerviums are, it's probably my favorite anthurium there is. Primarily because it's just so easy. It's such an easy one to, you know, to grow. And I think as far as like the fancy anthuriums go, Clarinerviums are probably a lot more accessible than the other ones. And they're probably also more affordable in my opinion. I don't know. What do you recommend?
Well, Vichy, because they're not bitchy, although the name sounds bitchy. They're Vichy. And also, like, you could see the progression of the leaves. I feel like it's fun. They're easy because they're very, like, just green and not finicky velvety, you know. But through the years, you could clearly see how the progression of a very young leaf transitions into more abs and more pronounced lobing, if that's a thing on the leaf. You know, I feel like they're easy. And what else? Like maybe the pendant anthuriums.
Okay.
The Waroks are still expensive now, but I feel like there's more options on where to source them. So I feel like they're just getting more available. And I don't know, like strappy anthuriums to me have a special um, appeal, I guess. But it's kind of like a hit or miss because I didn't really find my strappy anthurium like locally, so I would not really know how it would have been if I found it locally and see how it would have just like naturally acclimated compared to me importing and have that like mindset that, oh my God, this is gonna be a rough journey.
Yeah, totally. So I have a question for you. Warrock is definitely not for a beginner. Yes, I agree because I killed mine and I'm still scarred by that. So Sai, when you acquire a new anthurium, kind of what are your steps or what's your process to acclimate it to your home?
Well, I did have a few Anthurium fails too, and that's regardless if I got them with substrate or just the Anthurium itself bare rooted. My go-to, most of the time I receive them like just the plant itself, no substrate. So I soak that in water. If it's a long travel, I try to hydrate it first and then probably like a few days only because I've had experiences where my magnificum like rotted in a few days because I probably soaked it too long and probably incorporated so many things in the water, you know, very beginner mistakes. So I would only hydrate it for a few days. I would give it and then probably position it somewhere near a humidifier so that the transition will be smoother. And then like light wise, because it came from a box, I wouldn't like just directly put it under the grow light. I'll probably put it in like 2-3 days ambient light from a grow light or from a window in direct light, and then slowly like build up the light situation. And you have to like, the thing with anthuriums is because it kind of they don't really show stress that fast because of the way their leaves are. It's kind of like tricky, or so most of the time too late when you realize like, oops, the thing rotted and I didn't see that everything was underneath the substrate, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I do. How about you?
So of course I wash everything, right? Because that's I just can't get away from that. Everything gets clean. The roots get really, you know, really squeaky clean for me. And then in the past, like I've just put it straight into pond, and it's fine. So an example of that is my silver blush. This was one of the original leaves that it came with. It's starting to yellow now, which is fine, right? But I mean, it's pushed out these gorgeous leaves.
God.
You know, look at that.
Oh my God.
So I just put it straight in pond and had no issues with it. But something that I'm trying now is I'm bagging them. I don't like to use a humidifier in the house, and really, I'll admit that I use it at the very coldest like nights of winter, just because it's so dry with our heater on. So I will run a humidifier, like, you know, in the coldest part of winter, but only at night. But since it's summertime and the conditions are pretty ideal, I've started bagging them. So here's a forgetti eye that I got, I think about 2 weeks ago. And it has a gallon bag over it. And you know, the idea behind this is to maintain a higher direct, or what is the word I'm looking for? An immediate humidity just around the plant. And it's worked out really well. So this right here is a new leaf that it's pushing. And that was not happening at all when I received it. But what's even more exciting is that even though it's not completely sealed, right? You guys see here, it's open at the bottom. Let's see if you can see this. But there are new roots growing. Those roots right there have just started to push. And I think it's just with the slight increase in humidity with the bag. So I think what I'll do is I'll keep it bagged until those 2 new roots touch the substrate. And once it reaches that, then it'll feel the moisture and just continue downward. But that'll just make sure that, you know, the plant is stabilized in the pond and is also just, you know, getting all the nutrients that it needs. So yeah, I was pretty surprised by this. I just looked over just now and saw the new roots, and I was like, oh, well then. So yeah.
Well,
one I thought I would never get.
Been doing. I also realized that when I got to Vitarifoliums, like probably 3 weeks now, I just stuck them in pond, and I completely forgot about my tip of slowly acclimating, because they weren't that dry, because they were just from Florida, and the other ones, I think, from Puerto Rico. I found it on eBay, so don't judge me. So it wasn't that far of a travel. It was like 3 days. So I didn't have to like rehydrate everything, and just stuck it in pond, and it sits under a humidifier. So yeah, I think that's really effective. And most of the time when you get anthuriums, they're kind of like really large to fit into like your IKEA cabinet or your prop box, you know? So it's very practical to just put a plastic bag. You're using the plastic bag. You're at least finding another purpose for it.
Right.
And it's just a quick, easy, simple hack, which does the trick. But let's not I have to reiterate that you have to make sure that there's circulation. The way Kay does the bag, there's a little bit of circulation underneath. So, because most of the time people would just like bag everything up, and you know, when everything's super close, like it's not gonna get high humidity with no circulation or ventilation. It's gonna kill your plant. And yeah, just to answer a few questions, yes, Hoyas love humidity, although they're not that reactive to low humidity though, you know. I also have like since we're speaking of humidity, can you I Heart Plant Life, Atimia is asking like, what are your low and high humidity anthurium recommendations?
I don't know, because
do you even notice like the difference?
I don't monitor humidity here, so I would say all of mine are ambient. Whatever the highs and lows of the house is. And I know for a fact that our house can get down to about 20% in the winter. And then it can get as high as like 80% in the summer. But specifically which anthuriums, I wouldn't even know where to begin with that.
Yeah, for me too personally, I don't keep track of the highs and lows. And even before I started using a humidifier in this room where I keep most of them, I don't really notice the difference unless, you know, something got really sick on top of its struggle with the humidity. So yeah, I'll probably stick to like the Vichy, the Pallidiflorum, you know, and not the Warrock anymore, because Eunice is so against that. Okay, I think we answered Marge the plant lady's question about what to do when we get anthuriums in the mail. Okay, let's answer Daddy Longleaf's DM question. Like, his Anthurium is a shell of its former self. Does it have drinking problems?
That depends.
Well, you're not alone. That's why I was so adamant about the claries, because this is my first clary that I got in 2018. So it's also reduced to just a shell, or what we commonly refer to as a sad chunk. It's still alive though. It's in a parfait of pine and some moss. I see some new growth on the right side, but it's been a chunk for almost a year now. So I don't know. I think it's still alive. I'm thinking of washing it and then, cleaning up all the dried parts and maybe, putting it back in pond. It declined because I had thrips. It's quite unusual if you have your plants in pond and in a self-watering setup to get thrips, but it didn't like spread like wildfire. I was able to like combat everything with systemic, topical insecticides, but still it got the best of my dorayaki's leaves and my first claries and a lot of the pseudo spectabil leaves, but
yeah,
they're fighting for their dear life.
Oh, well, at least you still have the chunks, so
yes,
hopefully you'll
don't
be able
give
to
up on
have
the
them.
chunks.
Yeah. I think we had a question about pollinating, right?
Oh yes, we had a question about pollinating. I forgot her username, but yeah, she was, I think she was a lady. Okay, she was probably asking like if we could demonstrate or at least describe how we pollinate anthuriums. Yeah, you first because you do it regularly.
I've attempted, but I have not had any success. And I think part of it has to do with my anthuriums are just too young. So although they push inflorescences out all the time, they're not quite mature enough yet to support making berries, which is fine. I'm cool with that. But I actually have an example here of an inflorescence that is receptive. So for those who are unfamiliar with the stages of the inflorescence, anthurium will push out an inflorescence, and to avoid self-pollinating, it will do the male and female reproductive stages in 2 steps. So first it will be so first it is receptive, and by that I mean you'll see these little drops of dew forming along the individual flowers. So an inflorescence is made up of a ton of flowers on that one thingamabob. So it gets juicy. And I have an example here of what a juicy inflow looks like, you guys. So this is one of my clarinerviums. This is an old leaf. I'm not concerned about it. It's one of the oldest. I'm just letting all the old nutrients go back into the plant. Don't at me. But let me move closer here so that I can put this on my lap. So this has a receptive inflorescence right now. And if you can see here, I think I'm gonna have to do the beauty blogger thing, right? Yeah. So you can see that there are little drops of dew or sap right along the bottom. Those little beads indicate that this inflorescence is now receptive. So if you have another inflorescence that is creating pollen, or if you have saved pollen, then you can apply it to all these little specks here in hopes that it will take and that it'll, yes, it will, it'll take it and then make little berries. So I mentioned if you don't have an inflorescence that is creating pollen right now, that you can take your saved pollen. One thing that I have been doing, because I do want to start breeding anthuriums here, is every time one of my inflorescences creates pollen, I take a little condiment dish and I'll either tap it if it's loose enough, or I'll brush it with like a paintbrush. Yes, like that. And I'll collect it into the little condiment cup and I keep it in the freezer for when another inflorescence from another anthurium becomes receptive. Now, there are different, I'm going to use an orchid term. I don't think it's correct for anthuriums, but there are different alliances that, or like different groups within the anthurium genus, and you can't crossbreed between those. So I'm not the person to ask because I don't know, but I do know that with the velvety ones that I have here, I can cross-pollinate all of them with each other and it'll be fine. But what I can't do is take pollen from my Clarinervium and rub it onto my Superbum. They won't make it.
Yeah.
And I know I sound like a total dweeb right now because I can't explain this very well, but in layman's terms, you can't make apples and oranges breed. Like, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, I guess the way that I would interpret it is like get a heartleaf philodendron with something similar to that, because you know how the superbums, but I don't even think like a superbum would breed with a Vichy.
No, so I don't think it will either.
Like,
I think for
some matches
Superbum,
just don't happen.
Yeah. I think the only other one I can think of for Superbum would be Plumanii, which is like the fruffly leafed one. So those two can crossbreed. But there are much smarter folks out there who can probably explain this way better. And I'm sure there's also, you know, a number of literary works out there, if this is something that you guys wanted to look into, that will explain it with a lot more, just better. And a lot more confidence than I can. But yeah, you know, I just wanted to share because I did have an inflorescence that is receptive. That's what it looks like. And then in about a week, that same inflorescence will then look like it's got these little yellow things popping out of them. That's your pollen. Well, when it becomes, when it starts to push pollen, that's your pollen. And I've heard that Clarinervium is one of the very few that can actually self-pollinate because it'll confuse itself. I've read that, and I tried it on one of my other Clarinerviums.
It happened to me.
Did it?
It happened to me, yeah, because
mine turned yellow.
Before this one, I actually had probably like 10 seedlings or 15, and then I wasn't just consistent on keeping them alive, so they perished through the years. But that was so. When I imported it, it already had an inflorescence, and I didn't even know anything about it up until I probably I don't know, rubbed the two inflorescences together at 2 different times, or they were not at the same maturity level, I guess. But it just happened. Like, there were ripening berries, and people were like, "Oh, which one did you cross it breed with?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't even have another Anthurium to use it with." So now that you brought that up, I didn't know that it could self-pollinate and, you know, do that its own thing. So yeah, when I harvested the berries, I Googled or found a YouTube video about dipping it with some very mild, I think, hydrogen peroxide and water mixture, and then wait for this, or probably leave it overnight so that the skin of the seeds would soften. And then that's when I just started putting them in moist sphagnum moss. And then after a few weeks, they sprouted into these tiny little baby clary
that's
seedlings.
So exciting.
But my fault was when they were growing, I transferred them in pond, and it's not even like a self-watering thing. It was just like a pot with pond with water, and sometimes I would forget that there's no water anymore. So when I picked it up, like, most of the seedlings got rotten and they perished. But it happened. I did have at least some documentation. It's not even worth posting anymore because it's a failed experiment because they didn't really mature. But at least like halfway through, I have proof that it happened. Yeah, right. So yeah, anyone else has questions? I think we've answered a lot. So yeah, Plant Lady 77 also asked about the queen chunk. Now, my chunk, that's why it's probably doing nothing, is because I haven't really treated it to a higher humidity setup. It's just like in a room temperature. What happened to my first Warrock, that's why I say they're easy, is Mine didn't really like wilt or turn crispy. Like the leaves continued to be flat and straight after an import, and it never really got to a point where it didn't have any leaves at all. So I don't have indicators of like if it's loving humidity or not. It's just like always been flat. I guess the ambient humidity here is enough. But yeah, just I feel like if you have curling leaves with your warrock or your queen anthurium, it's just going to end up falling. And once the new growth pushes out, those are the ones that would really grow already acclimated to your environment. You know how all those older leaves grew up in greenhouses and they're treated so well, and then suddenly you take them at home and then all your humidity drops and all these inconsistent figures keep on happening. That's why the plant keeps reacting. So for now, I would say like keep your chunk and your humidity setup until new leaves push out, and those are more, well, I guess they're stronger to, you know, bear through the fluctuating humidity at home.
All right, so we have time for one last question, and I'm going to ask you, what is your favorite anthurium in your collection? Like, absolute favorite.
I think it's still the crystallinum, because it never really gave me a problem. And most of the time it looks like this, although it does have some crispy edges from the winter already. But it didn't really, well, it never really looked that sad. And that's why consistency is the key with me. And now, even if it's on a made-up self-watering setup where I just use some orchid pots, look at all those juicy roots.
Yes. Oh, look at that.
Look at the gunky thingy at the bottom. But yeah, I mean, if you're easy putting out leaves and you don't give me a headache, you'll be my favorite. Plus, this one looks nicer than my clary. So what's your favorite anthurium in your collection?
My favorite anthurium in my collection is my clarinerviums. I somehow have 3 of them now. But in my defense, one of them was a propagation, so yeah, I just love it. Here, let me pull this is my prettiest one.
My favorite anthurium in your collection are your silver blushes. They are amazing.
This is my prettiest clary, and this I got actually as a baby, and this is its first mature leaf that it's put out for me. Wow. And it's just perfect.
It's perfect. Congratulations.
It is. It's been so good. And when I got this, you see how it needs a repot, but it was only like this tall, and you can see how narrow the trunk was at the time. So it really was just a baby when I got it. I got this from Nina, Dirty Roots MA, when she had imported some. So this is my absolute favorite. And then a close second, yes, I do have to agree with you, is my silver blush, because how could you not love leaves like that? I just love it.
So pretty. And even the other one is more silvery and less big.
This one is almost all silver. This is the newest leaf that it put out.
And the leaves are getting bigger too.
They are. I know. Look at that. Size of my hand.
Oh my God.
And this was one of the leaves that it came with, like I mentioned earlier. So you can see how small it was compared to now. So thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. I hope that you learned a little something from our experience. This by no means, is like the only way to grow anthuriums. This is just what works for both Sai and I. And we found really great success in how we do things. And I think he and I, we bounce information and kind of our notes off of each other a lot. And we've kind of just been able to grow together with our anthuriums, and wanted to share that with you guys. So I hope everyone has a good night and a great weekend. And that's it. Stay tuned.
I don't know why I keep on doing this. I feel like there's music playing at the end of the show, But thank you.
Good night, guys.